It was a crisp Monday morning when Karoline Leavitt, a rising star in the political arena, arrived at her office with a sense of optimism. The sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the modern workspace filled with a mix of eager staffers and the faint murmur of strategy discussions. Just days before, she had successfully hosted a town hall meeting in her district, where she had passionately promised to tackle pressing economic issues. With her confidence bolstered by the community's enthusiastic response, she felt invigorated and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she settled into her chair, she took a moment to appreciate the vibrant energy surrounding her. The hum of productivity filled the room, and for a brief moment, everything felt perfect. Sipping her coffee, she reviewed her agenda for the day, which was packed with meetings and discussions about upcoming initiatives. The topics ranged from local infrastructure projects to educational reforms, all vital components of her vision for a brighter future. But as she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed incessantly on her desk. The continuous vibrations pulled her from her thoughts, hinting at something significant brewing beyond the walls of her office. She glanced at the screen, her heart sinking as she read the first notification. Tariffs on imported goods to increase sharply. Breaking news. A wave of unease washed over her as she quickly scrolled through the updates. The economic landscape was shifting beneath her feet. Within an hour, the gravity of the situation became clear. The announcement of sudden tariffs had sent shockwaves through the financial markets, igniting panic among businesses and consumers alike. Retailers and suppliers, already struggling to navigate the complexities of global trade, now faced the prospect of dramatically increased costs. Karoline's constituents, small business owners, farmers, and working families, were all affected. Their livelihoods hung in the balance, and she could sense the rising tide of anxiety through the digital chatter and phone calls flooding her office. "Karoline, we need to convene an emergency meeting," her chief of staff, Mark, said urgently as he burst into her office. His face was pale, illuminated by the glow of his phone screen displaying a flurry of social media posts criticizing the impending tariffs. "We can't let this get out of hand. The press is all over it." Karoline nodded, her mind racing as she gathered her thoughts. "Let's bring everyone in. We need to craft a coherent message to the public and a plan to mitigate the fallout." As her team assembled in the conference room, the atmosphere was tense. Karoline could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. The stakes were high, and she knew that her next steps would define not just her leadership, but also the fate of those she represented. With fervor, she listened to each team member's insights, reports from local businesses, economic forecasts, and the public's sentiment. The consensus was clear. Immediate action was necessary to address the mounting concerns and provide reassurance. Just as they began to devise a strategy, Karoline's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a second announcement, even more severe than the first. Additional tariffs would target key imports, which would inevitably ripple through the economy like a stone thrown into a pond. The news hit hard. Prices on everyday goods were set to rise, and the backlash from the public was already in full swing. "This is a disaster," one of her aides muttered, her brow furrowed in disbelief. Feeling the pressure intensify, Karoline strategized about how to communicate the complexities of these tariffs to her constituents. This wasn't just an economic issue. It was a deeply personal one, affecting families and businesses directly. She needed to balance the realities of the situation with empathy and transparency. They crafted a message that acknowledged the immediate impacts while emphasizing her commitment to finding solutions. Later that afternoon, Karoline stood before a sea of cameras and reporters at a hastily organized press conference. The room buzzed with anticipation, and as she approached the podium, a wave of nerves swept over her. She could feel the scrutiny of the public and the press weighing heavily on her, but she steadied herself, taking a deep breath. "Thank you all for..." Being here, she began, her voice firm yet compassionate. I understand the concerns surrounding the new tariffs and the uncertainty they bring. These decisions are not made lightly, and I assure you that I am committed to protecting our jobs and our economy. As she spoke, the crowd erupted with questions, some skeptical, others outright hostile. How can you justify these tariffs when they hurt local businesses? One reporter shot back. What are you doing to address the immediate impact on prices? Karoline leaned into the challenge. I recognize that these tariffs have immediate consequences, and I am working tirelessly to implement relief measures for those affected, she replied, her passion igniting. She outlined her proposed initiatives, including support for small businesses and plans for community forums to discuss the issues openly. Each point she made was met with a mix of responses, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in doubt. As the press conference concluded, Karoline felt a mix of relief and unease. She had faced the scrutiny head-on, but doubts lingered. Would her constituents believe in her commitment? Would her plans be enough to counter the chaos? That evening, as she returned to her office, Karoline reflected on the day's events. It had been a whirlwind, marked by unexpected challenges and fierce scrutiny. But through it all, she realized that true leadership was not only about making tough decisions, it was also about being present and accountable to her community. As she closed her office door, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was determined to turn this turmoil into an opportunity for growth and resilience. By noon, the news hit. A sudden announcement from the Trade Department regarding new tariffs on imported goods sent shockwaves through the economy. The air in Karoline Leavitt's office shifted dramatically as the implications of the tariffs became clear. Retailers and suppliers began to panic, their fears of skyrocketing prices materializing almost instantly. A wave of uncertainty swept through the local business community, and one by one, constituents began to reach out, their voices tinged with anxiety. "What does this mean for us?" asked a local store owner during a frantic call. The question echoed through many conversations, underscoring the vulnerability of families and businesses now facing an uncertain economic future. Karoline could hear the worry in their voices, and as each call ended, her heart sank deeper. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on her shoulders. Frustrated but determined, she sprang into action. "We need to convene an emergency meeting," she called to her chief of staff, Mark, who was already monitoring the social media fallout. "We have to come together and formulate a response before this gets out of hand." The fear of a public relations disaster loomed large, but Karoline knew the stakes were higher than just optics. Real lives were impacted by these decisions. Within minutes, her office was buzzing with activity as team members assembled in the conference room. The mood was tense, with everyone aware that they were facing a critical moment. Karoline took a deep breath as she stepped to the front of the room, trying to project the calm confidence she hoped to instill in her team. "All right, everyone. We need to break down what we know," she began, her voice steady but urgent. "The tariffs are set to increase significantly, affecting a wide range of imported goods. This could lead to price spikes that our constituents won't be able to absorb. We need to understand the full impact and formulate a plan." As her staff began to share insights and data, the gravity of the situation became increasingly apparent. Reports from local businesses outlined how rising costs would force them to either pass expenses on to consumers or cut back on workforce hours. Karoline's heart ached at the thought of families struggling to make ends meet, many of whom were already facing financial hardships. "Let's focus on who this will hit hardest: the small businesses, the families, and the workers," Mark suggested, flipping through a presentation filled with alarming statistics. "We need to give people something tangible to hold on to, reassurance that help is on the way." The discussion intensified as they brainstormed potential solutions and communication strategies. They explored providing immediate relief measures, such as grants for affected businesses and community forums to address public concerns. By pooling their collective knowledge, Karoline's team was determined to develop a proactive response that demonstrated their commitment to the community. Communication is key, Karoline emphasized. We need to be transparent about what's happening and what we're doing to help. I want to hold a press conference and address this head-on. The room collectively nodded, recognizing that a direct and honest approach would be essential in regaining public trust. As they finalized their strategy, Karoline reflected on how quickly circumstances could change in politics. Just days ago, she had been riding high after her successful town hall filled with hope and optimism. Now, she was thrust into a crisis that demanded her full attention and leadership. She felt a mix of adrenaline and trepidation coursing through her veins, fueled by a desire to make a difference. After drafting a communication plan and finalizing her talking points for the press conference, the team sprang into action. They worked through the details, ensuring that the information was clear, concise, and empathetic. Karoline understood that she needed to connect with people on a personal level, acknowledging their fears while presenting a path forward. As the clock ticked closer to the scheduled press conference, Karoline took a moment to collect herself. She glanced out the window, watching people move about their daily lives, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Her thoughts turned to her constituents' faces, the store owners, the teachers, the working-class families who depended on her to advocate for them. With her team standing by her side, she walked to the podium, the flash of cameras illuminating the room. The audience buzzed with anticipation, and the tension was palpable. "Thank you for being here," she began, her voice steady but laced with concern. "I know today has brought uncertainty and fear to our community. The new tariffs announced this morning will impact many of you, and I want to be clear. I hear you and I am here to help." As she spoke, she outlined the steps her office was taking to address the crisis, emphasizing her commitment to finding solutions and supporting local businesses. The crowd reacted with a mix of skepticism and hope, and she could feel the weight of their expectations. Each question fired at her was met with patience and clarity, her determination shining through despite the challenges ahead. By the end of the press conference, Karoline felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with lingering worries. She had faced the storm directly, but as she left the podium, she knew the real work was just beginning. The road ahead would require resilience, collaboration, and unwavering commitment to her constituents as she navigated this turbulent political landscape. Her challenge would be to transform today's chaos into a united effort towards recovery and renewal. Just as she thought the situation couldn't get worse, a second wave of tariffs was announced, this one even more severe. The news hit her, like a punch to the gut. The initial tariffs had already stirred panic among her constituents, but this new announcement sent shock waves that reverberated throughout the economy, deepening fears and complicating an already dire situation. The implications were staggering. Prices on essential goods would rise even higher, and many local businesses teetered on the edge of collapse. As the details of the new tariffs spread, the backlash was immediate and fierce. Social media erupted, with criticism drowning out any voices of support. Hashtags like Leavitt's tariff catastrophe began trending, and Karoline could hardly keep pace with the flood of negative sentiment. The press was relentless, bombarding her office with calls for statements and reactions, eager to capitalize on the turmoil. "What's your plan, Congresswoman?" they demanded. "How will you address this economic crisis?" Karoline felt the pressure mounting. She had been thrust into the spotlight, and every misstep could have dire consequences for her political future, and more importantly, for the people she represented. Her heart raced as she began to strategize about how to communicate the complexities of these tariffs to her constituents. It was crucial that she conveyed not just the facts, but also empathy and understanding of the hardships they faced. In her office, surrounded by her closest advisors, Karoline laid out her approach. "We need to break down exactly what these tariffs mean for our community," she instructed, her voice steady despite the anxiety swirling within her. "We can't just throw numbers at people. We have to give context. They need to understand how this impacts their daily lives and what steps we're taking to help them." Mark, her chief of staff, nodded. "We should prepare a detailed FAQ for the website addressing common concerns, but we also need to show that we're actively working on solutions. This isn't just a problem. It's about people. We need to humanize it." Karoline agreed, feeling the gravity of their task. As they crafted their message, they considered the local businesses that would be hardest hit. She recalled the small bakery in her district that had struggled to stay afloat even before the tariffs were imposed. Its owner, a single mother, had poured her life savings into the business, and now the looming price hikes threatened to shatter her dreams. Karoline knew she had to connect those stories to her policy actions. As the hours ticked by, Karoline prepared for a press conference that would serve as an opportunity to address the mounting concerns head-on. She meticulously went over her talking points, trying to anticipate the questions she would face. Each time she practiced, she felt the weight of her constituents' hopes and fears resting squarely on her shoulders. She was determined to be their advocate, but the stakes had never felt higher. On the day of the press conference, the energy in the air was electric with tension. Reporters filled the room, their eyes trained on her, eager to capture her every word. As she approached the podium, Karoline took a moment to breathe deeply, steadying herself for the challenge ahead. The flashing cameras felt like an unrelenting spotlight, illuminating the pressure she faced. "Thank you for coming today," she began, her voice strong yet sincere. "I stand before you not just as your representative, but as someone who deeply understands the challenges many of you are facing in light of the new tariffs announced. These changes are not just numbers on a page. They are real, tangible impacts on our families and businesses." She carefully laid out the facts, explaining the reasons behind the tariffs while emphasizing the government's economic strategy. "While these measures are intended to protect American jobs, I fully acknowledge the immediate hardships they have created here at home." Her tone was empathetic, aiming to connect with the audience's concerns. "I want you to know that I am fighting for you." Questions quickly erupted from the crowd, each one more pointed than the last. "What specific steps are you taking to mitigate the impacts of these tariffs?" one reporter asked, a critical edge in their tone. Karoline met their gaze, determined to respond with clarity. "We are exploring immediate relief measures, including grants for affected businesses and a dialogue with local leaders to create an economic support plan tailored to our communities' needs," she replied, her resolve unwavering. "I am committed to ensuring that we don't just weather this storm, but come out stronger on the other side." Her words seemed to resonate, and she could feel a shift in the room. The audience, initially skeptical, began to engage more thoughtfully, asking insightful questions about how her proposed measures would work. Karoline took each question seriously, acknowledging each concern and providing detailed answers. As the press conference wrapped up, she felt a wave of relief mixed with lingering apprehension. The battle for public opinion was far from over, but she had taken a crucial step in addressing the emotional and financial toll these tariffs were taking on her constituents. With renewed determination, she left the podium, knowing that every effort she made would be vital in navigating this complex crisis. Back in her office, as the adrenaline started to fade, Karoline reflected on the challenges ahead. The road to recovery would be long, and the impact of the tariffs would be felt for months, if not years, to come. But she was resolute. With her team and her community behind her, she was determined to turn this crisis into an opportunity for growth and resilience, ensuring that no voice went unheard in the process. At the press conference, Karoline Leavitt stood resolute, her heart pounding as she faced a room brimming with reporters, cameras flashing like strobe lights. The tension was palpable, the air thick with skepticism. A few days earlier, she had been heralded as a rising star, but now, amid the chaos of newly announced tariffs, her political future felt precarious. She understood the gravity of the moment. Her words could either restore faith or deepen distrust among her constituents. "Thank you for being here," Karoline began, her voice steady despite the storm of questions. "Today, we're addressing a situation that has wide-ranging implications for our economy and our families. These tariffs, while challenging, are necessary for protecting our jobs and ensuring fair trade practices." She took a breath, scanning the room to gauge the reaction. The crowd remained skeptical, and she could see the furrowed brows and crossed arms. It was clear that many were not convinced. One reporter shot up a hand, interrupting her with pointed criticism. "Congresswoman Leavitt, how can you justify these tariffs when local businesses are already struggling? Isn't this going to hurt more than help?" The question echoed in the room, a sentiment felt by many of her constituents. Karoline felt a tightening in her chest but pressed on, determined to address their concerns head-on. "I understand the immediate impact these tariffs have on local businesses and consumers," she replied, leaning into her role as a communicator. "But we must consider the bigger picture. These measures are designed to level the playing field against countries that do not play by the same rules, which ultimately protects American jobs and industries from unfair competition." As she spoke, the skepticism in the room didn't dissipate. The criticism felt like a tidal wave, and Karoline was acutely aware that she needed to shift the narrative. She took a moment gathering her thoughts while recalling the small businesses back in her district, those shop owners who had poured their lives into their ventures only to be met with uncertainty. "Let me be clear," she continued, her tone firm yet compassionate. "We are not blind to the struggles that our local businesses face. I am working on a comprehensive economic relief plan that will support those affected by these tariffs. This includes grants for small businesses, tax incentives for local manufacturers, and community forums to gather feedback and provide resources." As she outlined her plans, the cameras continued to capture her every word, and she could feel the weight of her responsibility intensifying. Critics in the audience began to murmur, some shifting in their seats as they processed her proposals. Karoline kept her focus steady, tapping into her passion for representing her constituents. A second reporter stood up, challenging her further. "What about the consumers? Prices are going to rise because of these tariffs. How can you assure us that families won't bear the brunt of this decision?" Karoline knew this was a pivotal moment. "I hear your concerns," she said, her voice rising slightly to convey urgency. "I understand that rising prices are not just numbers. They affect real people and families. That's why I am advocating for immediate measures to mitigate those price hikes. I'll be working closely with local leaders and economists to explore price stabilization options and ensure that assistance reaches those who need it most." As she spoke, she noticed a shift in the room. Some reporters were taking notes more diligently, their expressions softening as she articulated her commitment to addressing their concerns. The skepticism remained, but Karoline sensed a flicker of hope beginning to emerge. "Let's not forget, we are in this together," she added, her voice imbued with sincerity. "I want to invite each of you, business owners, consumers, families, to reach out to my office. Your stories matter, and I am here to listen. Together, we can navigate this challenge." The press conference was lively, with back-and-forth questions flowing. Karoline felt herself gaining momentum, fueled by the desire to serve her constituents. She could see a few heads nodding in agreement, their skepticism giving way to cautious optimism as she laid out the details of her relief plans. "Rest assured, this administration is committed to ensuring that no community is left behind in this economic transition," she concluded, her voice resonant with authority. "Together, We will find solutions that strengthen our local economy and provide our families with the support they need. As she stepped away from the podium, adrenaline coursed through her veins. The questions had been tough, and the crowd had been challenging, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had laid out her vision and offered concrete plans for relief. And while the road ahead would be fraught with difficulties, she had taken a significant step toward restoring faith in her leadership. Back in her office, Karoline shared a quiet moment with her team, the weight of the day settling in. "We have a long way to go, but I think we made progress today," she said, grateful for their support. "Now the real work begins. We need to mobilize our resources and ensure that our community knows we are advocating for them." As she reflected on the day's events, Karoline realized that leadership was about more than just navigating crises. It was about building trust and providing hope in times of uncertainty. She was ready to rise to the occasion, committed to guiding her community through this storm and emerging stronger together. By the end of the day, the chaos had subsided, but the aftermath lingered like a thick fog over her office. Karoline Leavitt sat at her desk staring at the scattering of papers, notes from the press conference, economic reports, and messages from anxious constituents. Each piece of paper represented a voice, a concern, a story that she felt compelled to address. She took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of coffee mixed with the faint aroma of her office plants. It was grounding, a reminder that amidst the uncertainty, she still had a life to return to. Reflecting on the challenges ahead, she knew the work was far from over. The day had been a whirlwind of questions and criticisms, but she had faced it, head on. And now, it was time for action. It was imperative to connect with local business leaders and community members who were reeling from the announcements of the new tariffs. She picked up her phone and began reaching out, determined to establish a dialogue that would help her understand the specific impacts they were facing. Her first call was to Sam, the owner of a local hardware store that had been a staple in the community for decades. "Karoline, I appreciate you reaching out," Sam said, his voice weary but grateful. "We're worried about how these tariffs will affect our prices. Many of our suppliers are already raising costs, and if this continues, I'm not sure how long we can keep our doors open." "I understand, Sam," Karoline replied, her heart heavy with empathy. "I want to assure you that I'm committed to finding solutions. I'm working on relief initiatives, and I'd love to meet with you and other business owners to discuss how we can support each other during this tumultuous time." As she hung up, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each conversation reaffirmed her belief that, despite the challenges, a collective effort could make a difference. She continued her outreach, speaking with farmers, retailers, and even teachers, each individual sharing genuine concerns about rising prices and economic stability. In every exchange, Karoline listened intently, taking notes and absorbing the emotional weight of their words. "We need access to resources and information on how to adapt," one local farmer explained. "Our margins are thin as it is, and any price increases could be devastating." Karoline promised to advocate for their needs and vowed to keep the lines of communication open. Her determination fueled her, transforming her initial frustration into a clear action plan. By the time she wrapped up her calls, she knew she needed to convene a community meeting, a town hall to create a space where voices could be heard and solutions collectively brainstormed. Later that evening, as she closed her office door, she felt the exhaustion wash over her. She leaned against the door for a moment, letting herself absorb the weight of the day's events. The day had been daunting, filled with moments of doubt and pressure, yet it had solidified her commitment to her constituents in a way she hadn't anticipated. The chaos, while overwhelming, had also illuminated the path forward. She pulled out her planner, flipping through the pages to find a suitable date for the town hall. "Let's aim for next week," she murmured to herself, jotting down a list of potential talking points and topics to cover. She wanted to ensure the meeting addressed not only the tariffs, but also the broader economic trends affecting her district. As she organized her thoughts, she reflected on the strength of community. This was not just about navigating tariffs. It was about rallying together, supporting one another through uncertainties, and advocating for shared interests. The relationships she had built throughout her tenure were invaluable, and she was determined to leverage them for the benefit of her constituents. With a growing sense of purpose, she began drafting an email to her team, outlining the town hall, meeting and encouraging everyone to spread the word. "We need to make sure our community knows we're here for them," she typed, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's prepare resources, FAQs, and information packets to distribute." As the night wore on, Karoline found herself energized by the challenge ahead. The road would be tough, she knew that. But with resolve and the unwavering support of her community, she felt ready to turn turmoil into opportunity. She closed her laptop and looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The beauty of the moment offered a sense of calm and clarity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Karoline was resolved to confront them head-on, armed with the stories and concerns of her constituents. With a deep breath, she turned off the lights in her office, stepping into the evening air. The chaos of the day may have left its mark, but it also ignited a fire within her, a commitment to fight for her community, turning every obstacle into an opportunity for growth and resilience. She was ready to navigate the turbulent waters ahead, knowing she would do so surrounded by the very people she aimed to serve.